Well, welcome back to our security enablement series here at Cybrary. Today we are joined by Kenny Flynn, our senior data engineer here at Cybrary. Thanks for coming in today. Kenny, how are you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks. So our whole series is about security enablement. So kind of from a data engineering side, like how is that something that you think about or kind of that enters into like your day-to-day activities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, I would say my biggest responsibility is kind of like data enablement to some extent is what I consider it. Is that making sure that the people that need the data that they, need to get their job done are getting it. So a big part of that is, in terms of the implementation, like how do we get these things from point A to point B? But then also trying to do it in like a safe and responsible way. And that's where the security enablement comes into it, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of your time must have been spent probably with Jonathan, I'm guessing, figuring out kind of what is the best process of sending that data. Because, I mean, we don't have extremely sensitive information here, but I mean, it's still stuff that we wouldn't want to get out. So I'm sure there's a lot of thought process that goes into figuring out the best way to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, it's always a big factor where, we kind of have to take a step back. Where most of these conversations where we kick off a new project where people are like, well, I just want to get the data here. And I was like, all right, we can do that. Like I always tell people like, yeah, anything's possible, but it's more of a question of like, should we be doing that?
Yeah.
And like, is that the best way or are there safer ways? And like, we need to have backup and have a conversation about that. It might slow us down ultimately in terms of like getting to a final product, which can be frustrating sometimes, especially for the consumer, or, especially in this startup, you got to move quickly, right? It's about getting the value out ASAP.
Constantly.
So, people can get frustrated around that, but it's always something that we have to think about and take a step back and make sure that we're being responsible. I think as a data scientist, as a data engineer, whenever you're touching data, you're always exposed. You basically have the access to these things that most people don't get access to. So it's like with all this responsibility, you got to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with being the data engineer here, and I'm sure it's the same as other places. You have probably one of the highest accesses to our information, everything like that, and deciding where it's going. So yeah, I'm sure security is always something you're constantly thinking about.
Yeah, and even just like day-to-day stuff, right? Like emails. They give you all this training about making sure you're not clicking on suspicious links. To some extent, since you are that person that has access to these mission critical type assets, sometimes the pressure's on to really make sure that you're not messing up, to some extent. Like if you get compromised, then that's a big problem. So that's a big part of it too. It's just, making sure that you are taking this stuff seriously and really understanding the magnitude of what you are working with. I think it's easy to, when you're working on some of these, like if you're entering data science and stuff, you kind of get these sample data sets where it's just kind of like ones and zeros or just values on a sheet. But you have to realize that most of the time this data is tied to real people, real, potentially important information, real identifiable information, real credit card numbers, real stuff, so you have to be super careful about, what am I accessing, making sure that if I am pulling sensitive data, like only pulling exactly what you need and being very specific about the permissions that you have set in place and making sure that you're always carefully defining who has access to these things. You don't want to just publish some dashboard which has, anyone in the universe could find it. So you got to be careful about that too. So even just like little things like that where it's always got to be in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of going through and giving people access to certain things, if an accidental click or putting them in the wrong group or something like that is going to give somebody really high access that they don't need.
Exactly.
And then, you can run into an issue. In one of our earlier episodes, we talked with Leaf about the Equifax kind of hack and all of that information. Like, so now, after that, it's been about 2 years since that happened. Security is now at like there's a very high bar now set for like how secure like things need to be.
Yeah.
So I mean, is that something that you've noticed just in the last couple of years that now security is becoming more and more of a forethought instead of like an afterthought that people are thinking of?
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. I mean, if it isn't, it definitely should be.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting though, because to some extent, and I hope this is changing, but I think data science in particular, because it's so new. I mean, the field's only been around for maybe 2 years max. And it's really only like exploded probably within the last year, maybe even 6 months. You have all these new people coming on. There's all these new undergraduate degrees that are coming out. But traditionally, like myself, like I have a PhD in microbiology, right? So like a bit of an unusual background, end up in, software development and cybersecurity teaching and education. But that's like a common theme for a lot of data scientists, that we kind of come from non-traditional backgrounds. And just because we've gotten used to answering analytical questions using data, right? So that kind of spring, a lot of people into this field. But because of that, in the nature of the people that are practicing data science today, I think we have some catching up to do. And it's not really as ingrained into our backgrounds as it might be. So like some person who has their background in theoretical physics might not be thinking about cybersecurity. Is not like the first thing that pops into their mind, right? Or someone with a strong mathematics background or mechanical engineering is a pretty common one too. So I think that's a big part of it too, is that making sure that these data scientists understand that like this is something that needs to be in the forethought of your mind. And I think we're making good progress where there's a lot of like DevSEC Ops and stuff. I think they're doing such a good job of keeping us honest and making sure. But I think that's going to be a big part of it, is going to be making sure that the new data scientists that are coming on the scene are also kind of getting well versed in these DevSEC Ops type topics and getting trained up. Yeah,
something that like we were talking briefly before this, that maybe it's something that is now part of people's onboarding and just kind of like continuing education and stuff. Like, we have security training that we do once a month here. Maybe it's something like that now people are starting to, it's a constant learning cycle. It's not something that you're like, oh yeah, like I was in the class for 3 hours my first day and I don't remember any of it. And that's fine. I'm not on the security team. That's not an issue I have to worry about. Now it's kind of, it's everyone's problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's going to be interesting. I think I think teams are going to have to build themselves around this concept too to really be successful. I think, and that was something that attracted me to this position here, is that, Mike, kind of the VP of engineering of our team, he's got a very strong DevSecOps mindset. Yeah. And like Jonathan, I knew before as well. And I know he's got a very strong background in this as well. And I knew that coming to this position, I was going to be very closely aligned with them, which is something I really wanted. Yeah. I think some data science teams, for better or worse, they're much more exploratory, which could be fun and exciting, but they're just not, that's like not their main focus. Yeah. But you're still going to need some sort of component where at the end of the day, all these fancy analytical models or cool things that you're doing with data need to get implemented in production, which is where all the DevSec Ops, someone still needs to be that person to translate the theoretical models into real life practice. And that can be sometimes a bit of an uphill battle, but it's always going to have to be something. Someone's going to have to be that person, that liaison between data and DevSec Ops. Yeah. And I think that's where I kind of hope that data engineering is going to go to some extent. This kind of like hybrid field that kind of sits in between
kind of both
pure data science and like pure DevOps, DevSec Ops. And, I kind of envision that data engineer to kind of be that liaison between the two fields where you have the theory and like the cool cutting edge technology versus like, this is the safe thing.
How to secure it. What's the best way to do it?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. Like now that's becoming more of a thing, that the teams are working together and not just having the security team kind of doing all of this themselves. Yeah, maybe it's kind of creating a new field, it sounds like, with a new person that's going to need to be in there that can do a little bit of both.
Yeah, and that's why I was excited, because I was like the first hire of this new like data team too. So I'm also excited that, that since we're kind of building this strong foundation, I think that will really set the stage for not only like a successful data science group that eventually will, hopefully we'll have a big data science group here iterating on. Yeah, exactly. But then like we're kind of setting the stage for them to be doing that in like a safe and secure way and a responsible way too, which I think a lot of times, these startups, I think they, just based on the nature of the businesses, they'll start with more of like a theory-based concept and then kind of scale up from there. Yeah. Which, not to say that that's right or wrong, but then like, you kind of have to play a lot of catch up then later, where you've come up with all these fancy models that might be like cutting edge, but then it's like, okay, then the risk is that you're trying to rush to market to deliver that value, to sell it to your customers. Yeah. And so then, that's when you start cutting corners.
Yeah,
and mistakes are getting made. And then next thing you know, security breaches are happening down the field.
Yeah,
so,
you forget some easy thing and then,
Exactly. So I don't know. I'm excited about that. And I think it's going to be a big onus on up and coming data scientists and data engineers to really put the time in to really come, to security enable, because it's really going to come down to them. They're the ones that are holding all the keys to the valuable data.
Yeah, kind of the keys to the kingdom, like you said earlier. Yeah, like you do kind of have all of the access. So that person should 100% have at least the running knowledge of, security and what they need to be aware of and everything.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, great, Kenny. Thank you for coming out today and speaking with me and just giving kind of your take from a data engineering standpoint on security enablement. So I'm excited to see where this goes and kind of how our data team kind of builds out from here, especially kind of you building it from the ground up.
Me too, man. I'm excited. It's going to be great.
Well, thank you again, Kenny. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me. Take care.